This is Faith Family Cars Podcast. I'm Jerry.
I'm Zach.
Hit the key.
I remember the first time that I thought I did a Burnout. I claimed it as my own, but he had a 340 Dart. It was a 67. He put a hot 340 in it, had a 4-speed in it, 410 gears, and 8 3/4 sure grip. And he said, come sit in my lap, don't tell your mom. And I held on to the steering wheel just like this, which he was holding the steering wheel on the bottom kind of like that. And I was like, all right, this is it. This is my first Burnout. And he dumps the clutch, sidesteps it at like $5,000 or $6,000 or whatever. And we just laid patch all the way up and down the road. And I was like, this is the best thing ever.
Because if you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For with the heart of one believes and is justified, and with the mouth of one confesses and is saved.
Hey guys, welcome back to Faith Family Cars Podcast. And Dylan McCool, how's it going today?
Oh, it's swell. It's a beautiful day. Love it. Great to be here. Really excited to talk with you guys.
Hey, we're glad that you are on. It seems like, I don't know how many months, but we've been working to try to get you on. And I'm so glad that we finally got you on here. Things worked out. Hey, we were supposed to do this last week, but you had snow moving in, and we had some bad weather moving in too. So it kind of hindered things for everybody. But
yeah, I appreciate y'all being lenient with me. I was worried about, getting out and doing something and, having to get out here and, because we don't even have good internet where I'm at. I have to go and get internet where I'm not even home right now. So we don't have internet. We're so out in the boonies, we got nothing. So I was like, if I got to travel somewhere, I might want to be careful, but all is well. We made it this week, and I appreciate y'all working with me.
That's awesome. So we're super glad to have you on. So I met you a couple years ago, and I'm sure you don't remember any of this, but I met you.
Oh, we were both there.
Yeah, Zach was with. Yep. We were both there. We met you at Ford Fest a couple years ago, and you had a 4-wheel drive F100 there.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
it might have been an F-150.
Yeah, it might have been an F-150.
I love that truck. It was a really sharp truck. And then last year we met on Power Tour, and you had your Charger on Power Tour, and that car is so beautiful. I love the patina on that car, and that green. The green is I don't know, something about that green just really looks good.
It's almost camouflage, ain't it?
Yeah, well, with the patina, yeah.
Yeah, that car's an interesting story. We can go into that later, but it's interesting.
Well, I'm a sucker for dog dish. Steelies with dog dish caps, and that car just looks good with the patina and the Steelies. So
I appreciate it.
Yeah, so you are a guy that I really wanted to bring on a podcast early on, and just kind of felt led in your direction. Been following you on YouTube for quite some time, and I guess for probably about 3 or 4 years now. And that's when I really started getting into watching YouTube. I mean, I'm an old guy, I guess, when it comes to that kind of stuff. But so I got a little story I want to tell about Power Tour a couple years ago, just kind of kick things off here. But I guess it's 2022 Power Tour. You took your white Camaro, and we joined the tour like halfway through. I want to say it was in Charlotte, and it was either Charlotte or Rockingham. And you had the car parked in the petty booth. And of course you had Romans 10, 9, and 10, scripture we just wrote, written across the back window. And you had tracks, the Bible tracks out underneath the hood, or maybe they were underneath the windshield wiper. And I saw those, and I was just really inspired by that. Okay. And you don't ever know who you're speaking to, because I've been a Christian since I was in my middle teens, and seeing that those still blessed me, and it got me thinking about what I could be doing. What can I be doing when we go to these shows? And I took one of the tracks. It was the Roman Road, and that really should have went to somebody that probably wasn't saved, to be able to read. But I took it because it meant so much to me seeing that. All right. I'm like, this is a young man. He's spreading the word just through a simple way, So I bring the track home, and I had it for 2 years. And I gave that track to Zach's wife back last April.
In May.
Or early May.
April or May, yeah.
And this was right before she got saved, and she read through the track, and we were doing a little Bible study about Romans, and the following month she got saved, and she still has that track in her Bible. And to me, that's just a cool story, but that all came from you. And to this day, when we go to car shows, I have tracks laying out underneath the hood. So,
well, you telling me that, I mean, and I'll tell you right now, I mean, it obviously, you can give me credit, but I really can't. That's all God, obviously. And I know you know that too. But man, I'm glad you told me that too, because we had a power tour come up this in 2024. Obviously, that was a year after the Camaro, and I had the same idea to do pass tracks out, but I'll be honest with you, I was discouraged about it, and I really didn't give out as many as I should have. I still left them on the car, put them under the hood or whatever, but I wasn't as, I guess, quick to take action on it, because whenever I was doing that, I had a handful of stickers that I would bring with me, and every time I hand somebody a sticker, I'd hand them a track. And I did that, at a couple stops, but I wasn't as, motivated, because I didn't feel like anybody got anything from it.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really know if anything was happening.
Yeah.
And I also had a friend of mine kind of make a comment to me, like, said some, a rude comment, but he apologized later, so it's okay. But still, it kind of discouraged me to doing it next year.
Yeah.
And I just wish that I'd been a little bit more, I guess, fervent about it. But you telling me that story, I mean, that put me on fire. When you told me last night, I was like, man, why did I not? And I was warmed up. I was revved up, ready to. I said, let's go. Go to the gates of hell with a water pistol kind of mentality.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, but just to hear that one little track, of all that stack I had, I passed out a ton of them, and they could have been thrown away as soon as they left. But just to know that one did something is enough for me to do it for every time I go to a car show or any kind of power tour, any kind of event. That's more than enough for me. So I appreciate you sharing that.
That one helped answer 4 years of prayer. Mm-hmm. I was praying for 4 years straight, and that was one of the turning points.
Yeah,
that's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah. So I actually used that track also to find out who the company was to get them from. So.
Really?
That's where I ordered mine from.
Yeah, so that's the ones we use to pass out on when we go to shows and stuff. But no, I understand what you mean by getting discouraged by it too, though, because the first time we did it, when you put the tracks on your truck at Ford Fest, we also put stickers there. And we constantly refilled the stickers, and I don't know if we refilled the tracks once. And it's like that's kind of discouraging too, because you're like, it just feels like no one is getting anything from this right now. But we've got to keep pressing on, just like you said. You've got to just keep doing it, because it's going to help somebody.
Yeah, you never know who it might help.
Yeah.
Well, and I had like I said, I was passing stickers out with those tracks, and I had people. I had like a line, not like a long line. I won't even say that I'm that big of a deal, but like I had a few people waiting in line to talk to me, and I ran out of stickers, and they said, well, is there anything, you got anything you could give me? And I was like, well, I'll give you this. I just gave them a track, and they said, well, can you sign it? I'm like, well, I guess I can. I'll sign a track, but I mean, as long as you take it, that's fine. So I guess, but that was important for me to at least get that out. And I wish that I had, been as adamant about that to do that this past year. But you telling me that story is like, man, it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Just a little thing like that can really change somebody's life.
It can. Yeah, it can. You just never know. You never know who might pick that up,
right?
And how it may change them forever.
Right. Absolutely.
So I got to thinking, I've seen a couple of your videos where I know you've done some work with your dad, and I don't really know where your car background came from. I haven't went back. Started watching you 2 or 3 years ago, and maybe been about 4 years ago, but I've not went way back to where you got started. So why don't you tell us how you got into automotive? What sparked your interest in Mopars?
Oh man, well, it goes back to 1996 when I was born, day one, because I had no choice but to love a car. I mean, I grew up riding in Challengers, Chargers, Cudas. My dad had a Little Red Express that he had restored.
Sweet.
That's
And
cool.
I was, yeah, I don't remember a time that I wasn't in an old car, basically. So, being around that as a young kid, it's like, this is the coolest thing ever. You watch your dad, you go out and blow the tires off something. It's just, how cool is that? And, it's, I remember the first time that I thought I did a burnout. I claimed it as my own, but he had a 340 Dart. It was a 67. He put a hot 340 in it, had a 4-speed in it, 410 gears, and 8 3/4 sure grip. And he said, come sit in my lap. Don't tell your mom. And I held on to the steering wheel just like this, which he was holding the steering wheel on the bottom, kind of like that. And I was like, all right, this is it. This is my first burnout. And he dumps the clutch, sidesteps it at like $5,000 or $6,000 or whatever. And we just laid patch all the way up and down the road. And I was like, this is the best thing ever.
Oh yeah,
Man.
that was awesome.
I mean, I was young and I started out, he had a 70 Challenger convertible that my favorite color is red because of that car, because it was red. And I remember I cried when he sold it. And whenever his Little Red Express, he had sold it to my grandparents when I was in high school, and I cried then. So I might have a problem, an emotional attachment.
Yeah.
But as far as how it relates to like cars and as far as in YouTube and such, I mean, I would go with him to drag out cars. He'd buy, he'd sell. I went with him every time he went and got a car. Everywhere we went, I would go with him. And I started to kind of get into YouTube and I have a love for movies. I love old car chases. I love how they're filmed. I think it's fascinating. If there's ever one day that somebody gives me enough money to direct a car chase, I think I would be an awesome candidate for it, because I just love that stuff.
Yeah.
And I had just wanted to start making videos on it. So I brought a little, I think it was a GoPro at that time. I had just a little GoPro Hero 2 or 3, and I think it was a Dodge Warlock was the first one we ever did, if I'm not mistaken. It was either that or the 69 Charger. It was one or the other. I can't remember. But anyway, we just walked out there and I saw this truck, and I just filmed us dragging it out of where it was at. It was in the middle of a cow pasture. The cows had rubbed up against the grill and broke the grill off, and I mean it was bad. The frame was tweaked because it was in a wreck, and they just parked it there. But it was a factory metallic green 77 Warlock, factory big block, factory buddy seat truck. So it had the gold pinstriping, the gold wagon wheels, all that was there. And
wow,
there wasn't very many of those trucks built from the factory. And I just drug it out, made a video of us cleaning it out, getting all the trash out of the bed, showing that it still had the big block under the hood with a thermoquad still attached to it, but it was locked up tight. And pressure washed it, cleaned it up, and there it was. And it blew up. People loved it. So we just, every time he'd go to get a car, because I couldn't afford it. I didn't have any money.
Yeah.
I was a broke college kid with $0. But, he could buy and sell cars and get, a little bit here and there. And I just go with him and film it. And the first few project videos that we did were actually his projects, like the, what did I call it? The scrap truck revival. That's what it was. So he had an 84 Dodge truck that he wanted to put a big block in. So he put a big block together. He put it in the truck. Then he got the Warlock, took the truck, the 84, pulled the engine and transmission out of it, put it in the Warlock, and then we got it running and driving, and it turned into the Ratty Muscle Truck revival. So that's kind of where that's when I first started talking on camera, which is weird. I hated it. I never pointed the camera at myself.
Yeah.
And we get that.
I got comfortable enough to point the camera at myself and talk. And I would never talk if he was there, though. Like, you got to go outside while I do this, or you can't be here.
Yeah, I get that too.
It's just second nature now, but it's kind of unnatural to be talking to like an audience that really isn't there with you.
Yeah.
You're talking to some, kind of like what we're doing right now. I mean, we're talking to an audience that we don't really see, but
yes.
then we went from that truck on to his Richard Petty shop truck. That 84 Dodge truck I was telling you about was the frame and suspension that went under that truck. And then it got to the point where I could start, I finally got a summer job. I was a cart pusher at Walmart, making big bucks at that point. I can remember being so proud. I saved up for a couple paychecks, and I was able to, because I got paid every 2 weeks, and it was like next to nothing at that point.
Yeah.
And I saved up and bought a set of radial TAs for my Dart Swinger, and I was so proud. I couldn't believe it. And
Nice.
that was the best day ever. But making, just little short videos here and there. I bought a duster, bought a truck, made a police car, all that kind of little project stuff, swapping a transmission for one that I knew didn't work right, but I still needed a transmission that worked at some point. It had at least some forward gears, but I put it in there anyway because I had no money. Stuff like that, it's fun, but that's kind of where it started, and it progressed to the will it run stuff, the dragging stuff out of the weeds, doing like a pressure washing video, and that led me to being able to quit my full-time job and do this full-time. So it's just there's a lot of little stuff in there in between that we can dive into, of course, but
Well, I want to go back just a little bit because we like to do a little bit of research, on the people that we interview, just so we know a little bit. But I noticed something, and I just thought it was very interesting. Your most popular video to date is a Creedence Clearwater Revival lyric video.
I know. And I have debated. I've debated on let's just take it down. It's not
leave it. I just gave you another view. I watched it the other day.
I know, and it's like I still get people. They're like, "What were you doing?" And I'll tell you why.
I like it.
At 2000, and that was in 2008, so I would have been 12 years old.
Yeah, it says 16 years ago. I know it's been a while.
Yeah, and YouTube was like the Wild West. You could do whatever.
Oh yeah.
And back then, YouTube had lyric videos for some reason were so popular.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
I remember when I was growing up, they were still popular into 2012, 2013 era. Yeah. They were still pretty popular then.
Just such a strange thing to look back now, but I noticed that there wasn't. So you go through phases with your music taste, and I was really into Creedence Clearwater Revival at this point in my life.
Hey, why not?
Hey, that's a good band, man.
Hey, why not? Why not? Love John Fogerty. But anyway, I was like, there's no really good lyric videos for this particular song, and I had their greatest hits CD on, and I created an MP3 file on my computer and made lyrics to it real quick with Windows Movie Maker and posted it. I was like, yep, here we go. And all of a sudden it just, whoop, there it goes. Just
it's got 29 million views on it. But your second most viewed video is a car video, so that's good. That's good.
Yeah. I'm still hoping one day they pass each other, but you never. Hopefully one day. But I just had to do it. I had to leave it just for the sake of
Well, I had to bring it up because, like I said, I was doing research and stuff, and I was just looking back on different things, and I clicked on most popular, and I was like, "What in the world?" I was like, "That's so different." I didn't expect it.
Yep.
So you've been doing YouTube for a long time. I mean, probably more than most anybody has, really, in the car world.
I've loved YouTube it started in 2005, and I was on it in 2005, but I didn't create an account until 2007. Like I said, just the fact of being able to create content, some kind of video. I mean, we were making home movies when I was a kid before we even had, before YouTube existed. I just thought it was so fun. And I taught myself how to edit. Not the best at it, but I can still do it, just trying to, just trial and error. And I have just loved it. And I was making, like I said earlier, I was making content before you could even get paid. I just did it because I loved it, and I
don't even know if I knew what YouTube was in 2008.
Well,
I seriously don't.
I did.
I was still using shop manuals and.
Right. See, I've loved YouTube, but that's also my generation. I grew up as YouTube was growing up, essentially. So I've followed every single stage of it. When back in the day when gaming videos weren't really super popular, and then now they're big and popular, and that's the thing people do now. The YouTube's changed so much since then. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I remember my original username was Hot Rod Dart, because I had a 74 Dart Sport. That was my first car ever.
That's cool.
My grandmother loaned me $600 to go buy this Dart Sport when I was 10 years old. And
Nice.
my mom was a little concerned. She's like, does a 10-year-old need a car? And my dad's like, yeah, it's fine. I promise. Don't worry. And we fixed this car, got it running and driving. My dad loaned me a 318 and a 904, which I still have. I have both of them. I have the
That's
original
cool.
engine to that car
Wow.
he gave it to me. Like I said, when I was like 10 or 12, we finally got it running by the time we did everything to it. And I still have that engine.
Nice.
But I still have the car too. I sold it when I was 17 because I was dead broke and I wanted to finish my 72 Swinger, the one that I was telling you about that I bought radial
Yeah.
TAs for.
Yeah.
And I wanted to finish it, but I parted that car out and sold it. And then the guy who I sold it to up in Indiana, he contacted me, I think it's probably 7 or 8 years later. I always told him, I said, if you ever want to sell it, let me know. And he just messaged me one day on Facebook, said, hey, I still have this car. Because I saw him at the Mopar Nationals in 2018. That was like 5 years later. And he said, I still have your car. I was like, well, if you ever sell it, tell me. And sure enough, we kept in contact, and I was able to buy the car back all these years
Nice.
That's
later.
awesome.
Haven't touched it yet, but I have it. That's all that matters. One day
yeah.
I'll build it and have it and finally finish it.
Well, that's probably one that you're probably going to want to take all the way through,
Yes.
and paint and everything. That was your first car. So.
Man, it's so cool hearing stories of people that like had really cool first cars.
Yeah.
My first car was an S10. I'm not.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with a good old F10 now. I
will say. Well, I actually never drove it. I was 14 when I bought it, and I sold it before I could drive.
Yeah.
Now, the first car I actually drove was a Chevy C1500 with a step side bed 350.
Okay.
That was a pretty cool truck.
That was a nice truck.
Yeah. But like I hear all these stories, like your first car, I mean, a Dart, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like yours was a Regal, that's cool. And I'm like, yeah, mine was an S10.
Yeah. Well, a Regal didn't sound cool back then, but now Regals are a little more sought after.
I mean,
any body is.
I mean, now a Regal Roller is like $6,000. I mean,
it's crazy.
It's insane.
Totally ridiculous.
And it's funny, like you kind of mentioned that about it was your first vehicle, but you never really drove it. I mean, I didn't really drive that car. I was dumb, a dumb 15-year-old, and I thought I could afford to restore it, and I blew it apart, pulled up all the glass, pulled the engine, transmission, whole front clip, everything, interior, bagged it all up, and tried to, I was going to paint it. And little did I know is that costs money, and when you blow a car apart, it's really hard to put it back together. So it sat blown apart in pieces for 2 years. And I, got my license when I was 16, and I never legally drove that car ever. And I still haven't to this day. I mean, I drove it up and down the road because we live out in the middle of nowhere, but, just don't tell my mom. But anyway, that's, but the car that I ended up actually getting when I was 16 was an 04 Mustang. It was my mom's car, and they bought it for my sister. My sister didn't like it because it was a manual. And they ended up buying her a different 04 Mustang that was an automatic. So it was a V6 5-speed. My mom drove it for probably a year or so. And I just was driving it one day when I had my permit. And I said, I really like this car. She's like, well, do you want it? Like, I guess. Cool. Yeah, it'd be fine with me. I got the car with 72,000 miles on it.
Wow.
And I drove it. I actually drove it here. I still drive that car. I got that was in 2012, and I still drive that car. It's my little runaround shop beater car, and it's got 172 on it now, 173 maybe.
I was going to ask you that because in your videos, I see a New Edge Mustang all the time in the background, and I thought, I wonder if that's his or if that's the guy that helps him out all the time.
That's it. That's mine.
That's pretty wild.
I drove it all through high school, through college. I parked it for a little while because I didn't use it anymore. It just, it sat for a couple years, but I finally got it back out. But yeah, that's my runaround car. I drive it everywhere. Hit a deer with it and just kept going.
3.8 V6, and it's still running with 107,000.
It's 3.9. It's
3.9.
Yeah, it's the last half of 2004. So I got the 3.9 when they upgraded.
That was a thing.
Little fun fact. Yeah, hey, now ask me about my new Edge V6s. I know it for some reason. I studied it. So back in like, I think it was in the latter half of 2004, it's the same thing as a 3.8, just a little more displacement because they came out with a new Windstar van, same engine.
Okay.
So if anybody asks, I have a minivan engine in my Mustang.
That's what's in it.
Wow.
I had no idea.
I didn't know they did that either, but I do know with those V6s, because when you said V6, I'm also surprised it was lasting that long because I was under the impression it was the 3.8.
Yeah.
And I know that some people have head gasket issues and everything
Yeah.
on those. But
Lots of leaking oil. Out
yeah,
of those.
yeah.
Oh, it does leave a little bit of oil.
Yeah.
Just a little, and they're prone to cracking exhaust manifolds. I've replaced both of them.
Okay.
For some reason, it's just that car. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of car I drove in high school and college, and like I said, I still drive it. I don't know how it still runs, but it still does.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's funny because you taught us something about SN95s that we didn't know.
Yeah,
He's like an SN95.
I'm the SN95 guy. Like I've owned 3 or 4 of them. I've owned 4 of them.
Well, it's a little known fact that because nobody wants the V6, if you're going to get one, you're going to want a GT, you want a 4.6 or a 5.0.
Yeah.
But I was doing research on it and just figured out like the last half of 04, they switched it to a 3.9, and that's it.
That's interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah.
That's such a random fact.
Yeah.
That's just like so odd.
Full of them. Full of useless knowledge. Full of it.
So from there, you started your YouTube at a young age, and as you got, I guess, into college age, how did you continue that going while you were in college? I mean,
it was kind of hard because I went to college about 3 hours away from where my parents were, all my vehicles. So, I would come home every few weeks or so, maybe once a week, maybe not twice a week, but like every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks or whatever.
mm-hmm.
And I would come home and, while I was home for the weekend, I'd piddle, rebuild a carburetor or, do something little to improve a vehicle or just film something. And it got to sometimes I was doing these things. This was about the time that I did it was a little thing called Today I Drive. So the channel started out as Hot Rod Dart. It went to Dylan Drives. So I started a little series called Today I Drive, which it's all still there on my channel. I think it's on a playlist, but that's kind of what I would do. So Dad had a car. Most of them were his cars at this point.
Yeah.
And we would make just like a little cinematic video of like showing details. It was only like 2, 3, 4 minutes long. And, set to some music and show the car doing burnouts and just driving. And there was only one that I actually drove. It was the very first one. That was the only real Dylan Drives where I actually drove it. But, I started going to, a couple friends of mine would have vehicles. We'd do a video with them, and those actually did very well on some of them. We had a couple of those that, back then 50,000 views was like, oh my gosh, this is insane. And I think a couple of them got like, I know I had one Plymouth video. Gosh, I'll have to go back and look, but I won't go look right now. But I know 58 Plymouth, a friend of mine had one, and we did one, and it did really well. And I was just so excited. That was kind of where it went to, because back then car reviews were huge. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard of That Dude in Blue.
Yeah. I watched a lot of his stuff growing up.
Yeah, that's what his channel was massive. And people were trying to emulate that, doing car reviews, except I was too scared to talk on camera. So I would just do these instead. Just do like a little showcase of, and I don't remember the last one. I think it was around 20,000 subscribers, or maybe a little less, was whenever I kind of faded that out and started focusing on going, dragging it out, doing a little bit of a detailed project kind of thing. But that's kind of where it started. So then it goes from Hot Rod Dart to Dylan Drives to Dylan McCool. And I think that's how it went, because you could change your channel name. I hope you still can. Yeah. If I ever want to get creative with mine at some point.
You still can. Yeah, we changed ours like a week ago.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how the progression of it went. Just trying to go with the trends, kind of going. But then I kind of found that audience that I enjoy, because then I can work on what I like to work on, and people still will watch,
Yeah.
and I'll try to, sometimes I'll throw in a vehicle that I'm like, well, we're just going to have fun with this one. Like right now I'm working on an 82 Plymouth Horizon.
I saw that.
For what reason? I don't know.
That's what I said. I said, what is he doing?
It's only because I want to see if I can. This is like a challenge. Because I kid you not, we popped the hood on this thing. One of the hood hinges just fell off. The hood's only propped up by one hood hinge, and so those things it's like a transverse front wheel drive, right?
Yeah.
So it's a little 4-cylinder. The valve cover's this way, and all you could see was the top of the valve cover, because there was a rat's nest full of like leaves and mulch and dirt piled up to that valve cover. So
Wow.
you couldn't see the
Gosh.
alternator, you couldn't see the master cylinder, you couldn't see the battery tray, the distributor. You couldn't look down and look into the engine. There was no radiator. You couldn't see it. And I had to shovel it out by hand, just dig and dig and dig, until finally I was like, oh, there's the alternator. Oh, there's the distributor. It was so corroded, I guess from rats just using the bathroom in there for so many years.
Yeah.
The distributor broke in half.
Oh,
It
wow.
just it just corroded, and the aluminum, it's made out of aluminum, and it just turned to dust. It was so brittle, it snapped. So I'm like, great. What have I done?
Yeah. So now it's become a challenge.
Yeah,
And
and I'm like,
running.
I guess I just like to torture myself. I don't know.
So is it a 2.2?
Yes, it is the 2.2.
Okay,
No
so
Volkswagen risers.
Yeah.
Nothing.
They got a big tall valve cover on them.
Yes.
Anyway, yeah. So
Yes.
that's pretty wild.
Right. And now here's my logic. This is what makes sense. Obviously, I bought the car for parts for another project. Yet I'm pulling parts off of the main project to make the parts car run. So I've got something crossed up here, and I don't know where. And here I am trying to make sense of it.
Wow.
I remember those cars when I was a kid, and they were Chrysler's, performance stuff. I mean, if you got the turbos, and I mean, and didn't they even have? So that one you said did you say it was an Omni?
It's a Horizon. It's basically a hatchback Omni. That's all it is.
But then they also had a Charger that was that same platform, wasn't it? Yeah.
Well, and that's what the main car I have is. It's an '83 Shelby Charger.
Okay.
So it's got it's Carroll Shelby, got stitching in. And I think the only difference on those cars was, I think the compression ratio was a little bit higher, maybe a hotter cam, and it's got a header on it. But the car had a cam lobe get wiped, so they parked it, and it's been sitting since like the early 2000s. The guy who I bought it from, he bought it from this family, and instead of just changing the cam, he pulls the entire engine and transmission out, all the axles, everything, and then gives me a big box of parts and says, I don't want this car anymore. Here you go. And now I'm just with an engineless Shelby Charger sitting in the back corner. So I got to thinking, I'm like, I could put it back together and get about 80 to 100 horsepower, if that.
Yeah.
Or, crazy, stupid or, you can put a Neon SRT4 engine and transmission in those cars.
Ooh,
so I went out and found an 05 SRT4 with 94,000 miles on it that was wrecked, and I bought it, and I'm going to, at some point, put that engine and transmission into that Shelby Charger.
That will be sweet.
That is going to be awesome. I love those cars. The Neons, I love their power plants. It's such a cool car. That's gonna be cool. That's gonna be a cool swap.
Yeah.
That was my first experience with front wheel drive. Anything really. I don't drive anything that's a front wheel drive. My wife's car, it's an all wheel drive, so I guess that counts kind of. But I like the obviously rear wheel drive stuff. But how cool are those little front wheel drive screaming 4-cylinder turbos? I mean, they're so fun, and even stock form. I mean, you get that thing just spinning and it just screams. And I'm like, just with the only thing that's done to this Neon is somebody cut the mufflers off and they put a blow off valve. That's it. But how fun is hear that turbo flutter? It's addicting.
It's gonna be such a cool car.
So I'm just thinking about the 80s there when those cars were out. My parents had an 86 Dodge Lancer
Okay.
it was a turbo car.
Yeah.
And I just know my dad, they had problems out of the transmission, of course, but he always talked about how much power and takeoff that car had.
Yeah.
He just loved the power that car had taken off, So, but anyway, it reminded me of that car. I was, man, I guess 8 or 9 years old when they had that car, but I remember it was a cool looking car because in that time, that's those K cars and the turbo cars is what carried Chrysler through
Absolutely.
the 80s. Yeah.
For sure. And that's the thing is like, I have a fascination with the cars that people shouldn't like, I guess, because, you look at like all the gas crisis causing the horsepower wars to come to an end. And then you have all these cars, the Malaise era that everybody hates on. But that's where I think some of the coolest cars come from. Now, I love the high horsepower muscle cars, but you can get a very affordable rear wheel drive V8 platform in a lot of, late 70s, early 80s and on for cheap. Like, that's why I have such a fascination. Y'all might laugh at this, and that's okay. But I had a 85 Chrysler Fifth Avenue that I thought was the coolest car known to man. It was actually a really nice car. An older gentleman could not make it run. My dad used to work at a repair shop at the time, and he was working the front desk, and this guy comes in and he's like, I can't make this car run. It don't want to run right. And a dealership had quoted him like a couple grand to put an engine in it or more. And he's like, I don't want to do it. And my dad bought that car for $200. And for my birthday, he gave me that car.
Nice.
That was my birthday present, was a Chrysler Fifth Avenue that didn't run. and I can't remember what we ended up doing with it to figure out if it did run or not, but we just converted it to electronic ignition. He gave me a 4-barrel intake. It was like a Holley single plane that was not good for that. It was not a good engine for that combo, and a little Holley 4-barrel, and we got it to run, and it ran great. So we put the muffler had a hole in it. So what do? You cut it off.
Cut it off.
Cut it off. I had big fat 275 60s on the back. I had to trim the wheel lip because they wouldn't fit right. And if we had more than one person in the car, it wouldn't spin the tires. I had my buddies riding with me one day, and I said, "Watch this." And I tried to do a brake stand and just loaded up. I said, "I promise it'll do it." And they ragged me for that for years. And like, you kept swearing up and down your car to a burnout, it wouldn't do it. But I guess that's kind of where my love for that era, because if y'all have seen my 86 Dodge Diplomat, the turbo police car, that's kind of where that love comes from. Just a cheap rear wheel drive V8 platform, and you can get all the goodies in that car and still have your Mopar power plant, but not spend 10 grand on a rusty roller. Because that car is solid as a rock with good interior, and then there you go. You get your miles ahead with a cheaper car that's way more solid. It may not look as cool, but you can still go just as fast.
Yeah. So, do you know what a Diplomat is?
No, I don't know what a Fifth Avenue is.
I figured he didn't know what it was. So
I think I've seen the police car.
Okay,
I've seen the police car. I guess I do. It's like the real boxy.
Boxy rear wheel drive V8 platform.
Okay.
But the New Yorker was like the upscale.
What is
Fifth Avenue, not New Yorker, the Fifth Avenue.
What is with these names?
Yeah, that was the upscale. So did yours have the real plush leather seats in it?
Oh yeah, like sitting on a sofa at your grandma's house. That's what it was like. And there was they have to have like those opera windows. So they had a half vinyl roof, and it had a fiberglass filler. So on the Diplomat, it's got a big rectangular back glass.
Yeah.
But on the Fifth Avenue, they had a fiberglass insert, and you would get a small back glass on this vinyl roof. Why they did that and why they thought that was the thing to do, I don't know. But I remember the headliner was falling down, and this was my first experience with like cars trying to kill me. The headliner was it was falling down, so I pulled it out, and I think it had like the package tray was all like warped up, so I just took it out. I was trying to push the insert back in from the inside around the back glass, and I snapped it in the top, snapped it in the bottom, and whenever I pushed on the bottom of it, that top end come loose and hit me square right between the eyes.
Oh man.
And I'm like, "Ooh, that stunned me." I kept going, kept working, and I could feel something running down my face. I'm like, what is that? I touched my face down here, and I had blood all the way down my face from that from that car trying to knock me out. And I had a scar here for years from that car hitting me between the eyes.
Yeah. Well, no, that platform was good for police cars, and that's what you did with yours. Yeah. Didn't you have that at Mo Party a couple years ago in the Burnout contest? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah,
so.
and that's a funny story too. That car, man, it was a rocket. I didn't have the timing and the tuning right. I just had it making turbo noises probably 2 days before we left.
Yeah, I watched that video.
I didn't have time to get the timing dialed in. I wanted to have it, dialing back so many degrees of timing per pound of boost. So I just locked it at 25. So that's safe. I only was making like 2.5 pounds of boost that whole weekend. I got it home, fixed the timing, fixed the wastegate pressure, adjusted the spring on it, put a cutout, and it ended up making around 10. And with proper timing and proper boost, that thing would fly. Gosh, it would fly. And I ended up during that burnout contest, it shut off and shot a big fireball out of the hood. So when I was going out there to do it, I wanted my lights to work because I've got a big light bar on top of the roof, and I have a light bar controller, and it quit working right before I was about to go. So I'm in a panic. I'm like, I'm about to go out here. I got to hurry. I unbolted a positive wire and took the hot wire to the lights and just shoved it under that and tightened it with my hand. Little did I know was that was the same wire that powered my Holly ECU. So when I swung around real hard, that wire just lost contact for the slightest second, and I had my foot buried as hard as it would go.
Yeah.
And so I still had my foot buried. It shuts off, and then I guess it makes contact again. So all that crankcase pressure ignites. It shoots a fireball out the hood, and it blows the breather cap off the valve cover. And it was laying in the engine bay.
Man.
Yeah. So it
was a lot of pressure.
It drove off.
Yeah.
Which funny story, I haven't showed this yet on a video, but I ended up blowing that car up. The engine has a serious rod knock now.
Oh,
so
nice.
I've actually got a new engine that I'm putting together for it. So
nice. So at that burnout competition, you actually you didn't win that competition, but I think a buddy of yours, Sleeper Dude, won that with his Gremlin.
Which I had been telling him all weekend. I said, if you do not win, this competition's rigged.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say right now, if you don't win.
He won Mo Party and Ford Fest.
Yes,
he had the Pinto out there for Ford Fest. Yeah, that was pretty awesome. So.
He sure did. I did get second place the next year.
Yeah.
But I had my Charger at third gear at $6,000 as fast as it would go, blowing the tires off that thing, and I still got second place. I'm like, what do I have to do to win a dang burnout contest?
Well, if we were there, we would have cheered you on, but we haven't been to the Mo Party yet. I think we're planning on trying to go this year.
I would actually like to, because I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a big Mopar guy, and as you can tell, I don't know a whole lot about like Chrysler vehicles that they've made.
That's okay. There's still time.
Well, I'm a diehard Ford guy. That is never happening. But I would really like to go because I feel like it'd be, sorry, my LS guys that watch this, but I think it'd be more interesting than LS Fest.
Yeah.
Just because we talked about this before. LS Fest is all LSs, and I kind of get tired of seeing LSs, if I'm being honest.
And Mo Party is more like Ford Fest. You have a lot of different power plants under the Mopar name, but it's all different.
And I'm very interested in the Mopar power plants because, before I bought this Mustang, I was looking at potentially getting a D100 or something.
Yeah.
That's what I was looking at buying instead of, I was going to kind of hop it up. I wanted a nice, decent horsepower vehicle to kind of not have a little street truck, but I ended up going the Mustang route because that's what I know the best. So, but I was looking at, I was doing research on these motors and stuff, and even the 318 could make decent power, and you can do stuff with those as well. So I think it'd be pretty interesting to learn more about and go to Mopar. I think it'd be fun.
Yeah, I've never been to LS Fest. I want to go, but I want to take a car, so I need to
Yeah.
get. I have one that I'm planning to do some kind of LS swap with because I want to be able to cover all three events if I'm
Oh, yeah.
able to. I mean, as close as I live to it, I might as well. I'm just 3 hours from Bowling Green. I might as well do it.
Yeah.
But Ford Fest, as you know, it's awesome. You know,
Yes.
it's kind of like well, I don't know how this next year is going to be because the way that it's set up is Ford Fest is also a part of the what's that Mustang?
NMRA.
NMRA.
Yeah, the
NMRA.
NMRA.
Yeah.
Did they not dissolve that this past
Yes,
year?
they did.
They did, but there are a lot of companies like the guy that runs Sick Week, Tom Bailey. He's picked up a lot of the classes that Mustangs run in NMRA. So like he has a Coyote stock class in one of his. So they're all going to eventually. I think all the classes are eventually going to get picked up by different companies. But Holly no longer has the Holly Ford Fest is no longer NMRA as well.
Yeah.
It's gone. So yeah, I'm kind of wondering what it's going to be like too.
Yeah. Well, to me,
go ahead. You're good. Go for it.
To me, it's going to be more like Mo Party or LS Fest. You're not going to have the NMRA Nationals, Grand Nationals or whatever. You're just going to have guys able to take their cars out there and race them, run them up and down the track.
Because at Ford Fest, you've got your drifting, you have the Crown Vic car, the race. They'll do like a big race with that. You got monster trucks. It's probably going to get smaller in scale, but I still think because you got some big names that come out to that event. Like we had, I think 1 year T-Pain was there. I'm like,
his car was there this year actually. Yeah,
and you had Von Gittin Jr. I think was Chelsea Denofa there 1 year.
Yeah, Chelsea Denofa is usually there, and then Chelsea Denofa is no longer in Formula Drift anymore. So Ben Hobson, which is Von Gittin Jr.'s new teammate, was there this year or 2024. But yeah,
so you have a lot of big names that come out there for that.
Oh yeah,
and it's awesome. And the same thing with Mo Party. I believe Tony Angelo was there last year. They had not this past year, but the year before that, if I'm not mistaken, because they were worried about weather, so a lot of people had to back out last minute. But it was still a great time. Rob Dahm was there in his
cool.
Challenger. I'm trying to think of who else was there. I don't remember, but then I was there. Obviously, if I miss Mo Party, something's wrong. That's
the way we are with Ford Fest.
We've been to Ford Fest. Actually, we went to NMRA in 2017 before it was Ford Fest.
Yeah.
Then we skipped 2018, and then Holly sponsored it, and it became Holly Ford Fest. NMRA
actually
Nationals in 2019.
Actually, that first year when Holly took over, Cletus McFarland was actually there in 2019.
Yeah.
So he did. I think the Crown Vic race started because of him, and then he also was drifting his Crown Vic that he's got. That's a Clickbait Patrol on the side.
I wish he'd come back because that Crown Vic race actually had the drift guys involved. Any of the YouTubers were there.
Yeah, there's a lot of
driving a car.
A lot of famous people doing
and they weren't just out there running around the track. They were running into each other, cutting across the middle of the track to get ahead of each other. I mean, it was a blast watching that.
This year it was more of like actual guys that build their Crown Vics for like a circle track racing,
Salem Speedway in Indiana. That's where they all came from. Yeah. And so we've watched Ford Fest grow year by year.
Right.
And it seems like each year it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So honestly, it's not going to hurt my feelings if it does drop off just a little bit because to me, it's better when it's just a little bit smaller. Like LS Fest. So this year, Ford Fest pretty much got rained out. There wasn't hardly anybody that showed up. We went because we've not missed a year, but there wasn't hardly anybody there. Right. Sleeper Dude brought his Falcon out. He was running it around the autocross track. But the LS Fest is huge. It is so big, you can't see everything. I mean, you cannot possibly see everything throughout the weekend. We had guys asking us, hey, did you see this car? Did you see that car? And we're like, no, where was it at? Well, it was in such and such's booth. And I said, well, how we missed that booth? Somehow it was over on this side next to whoever's car. And I'm like, we didn't make it that far.
And by the time we get there, they're in the lanes about to start racing.
Yeah.
So it was kind of, there was just a lot. There was a lot there.
It's so much. So, but
and I wanted to go to Ford Fest this past year, but again, like you said, the rain. But
Yeah.
I was going to bring a little my '79 Mercury Capri turbo car. We were
Nice.
actually working on it to prep it to get it to go to that, and then that rain stopped us from doing it. But
Yeah.
that's I know I do associate with Mopars, but they're here, and the Fords are right here for me because
Yeah.
my mom she's always been a Mustang fan. Like growing up, she got I think it was like an 80. So she graduated high school in '85, and she was driving a Fox body Mustang, like a little 4-cylinder car back then. And then when she graduated there, she got a brand new Mustang, a Fox body. So she's always loved. Even when I was a kid growing up, I mean, like I said, my first driving car was a Mustang because it was hers first. You know, she's had all growing up. I remember she had a '94 V6 5-speed. She had a Thunderbird at one point. Then she had this '04. Then she had another '05. You know, that was her last one was that '05. But she's always loved Mustangs. And my
Yeah.
grandfather, her dad, he bought a brand new '86 F-150 XLT Lariat. It was blue and tan. It was a long bed, had the dual tanks, blue interior, and it was the last year for the 351 HO
Mm-hmm.
because that year they went to fuel injection for the
Yeah.
302, but the
Mhm.
351 still had the carburetor, and we still have that truck. And
Nice. That's
just a
awesome.
fun little short story on it. You know, I did make a video on this. So, there was a storm that came through here in 2014, and my aunt and uncle had the identical truck, same year, short bed, dual tank, Lariat, but it was black with red interior. Beautiful truck. Had like 68 or 9,000 miles on it. They bought it new in '86, still had it in 2014. Storm came through, and a giant tree fell across it square. I mean, it went through the tailgate, landed on top of the cab, but didn't hurt the engine, and it
Hmm.
crushed the cab in like this.
Yeah.
And I posted a video of my uncle. He was a character. My dad wanted it, so he purchased it from the insurance company. Somehow was able to get it because it had a low mileage 351. Because by this
Mhm.
time, my grandfather's truck had over 200 something thousand miles on it. It had a 302 with an AOD that was missing third gear, and it got parked. And my uncle, with the cab like this, drove that truck about 5 or 6 miles from their house to my dad, my parents, Ace Ventura style,
Yeah.
to get his head out the glass. And when we got home, Dad's like, "You want to see what did a burnout?" Like, yeah. So he backs down the driveway and just lights up that rear tire, the right rear, and just leaves a big old cloud of smoke. That we ended up pulling the engine transmission out of it and putting in that truck, and it's still running to this day. And then my
Nice.
dad's dad, he had a '94 that he bought almost new, and we still have it too when he passed away. So we're big into Fords over here too, just as
Yeah.
much. You know, maybe not as much as the Mopars, but I love me a good old Ford. Don't you?
Well,
Don't even worry about that.
you're talking our language.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I got an '82 F100,
Yeah,
and that's my baby. It's lowered 306 that I built, and it's got fuel injection and cam and everything in it, 4-barrel
yeah.
car or intake and stuff.
Tell you what, it always gets looks when it's chopping, and then you pop the hood, and people are like, "Oh, that's a headline six." It chops like a V8 though.
It's the original motor, but I went through it. You know, it didn't have much oil pressure when I got it, and I went through the motor, and it's a good running, reliable truck now. And of course, we use drop beams to drop it. I've done a bunch of suspension work to it to stiffen it up. It rides pretty stiff now, but he has got a 96, 95 or 96.
It's a 95.
And then his brother's got a 96. And then we've had a bunch of 94 to 96 trucks out here. That's their favorite body style.
Yeah.
So we've had all kinds of them out here that we pulled parts and whatever we needed to put those trucks together. So,
Yeah.
Well, I had a '95 here a few months ago. It was it was owned by a local fire department, and they bought it brand new in '95. It was a single cab long bed. It had a 351, but it was still a C6. It was a 4-wheel drive, and which it had the Dana 50 front end with like the whatever you call, however, I don't, what do you get, the trailing arms, not trailing arms, but you know what I'm talking about.
They're the I beams, but they have the differential built in.
Right, exactly. So, but it had 52,000 miles on it when I bought it.
Wow.
It
Nice.
was solid white, had a camper top on the back with like a toolboxes in it, and it had all the stickers on the side, and beautiful, absolutely beautiful blue interior. Nothing wrong with it. Vinyl floor. I mean, and y'all know what that blue interior looks like. It's just imagine it, but perfect. Because my dad's 94, my grandpa's old truck has blue interior, and it's not perfect by any means.
Yeah.
So we look at those two compared to each other. I'm like, oh, this looks good.
Yeah.
All I did, I just changed the oil on it and put a set of tires on it, and drove it around for a little bit. Air worked, heat worked, everything worked on it, and I just bought it to resell.
Yeah.
But I was like, man, this is a good truck. I was a little bit heartbroken when I got rid of it.
Oh, I bet. I'd love to get my hands on something like that.
That'd be awesome. We love those old trucks though, and I've always been a truck guy. I've had a truck ever since me and my wife first got married. So 25 years ago, I bought my first pickup, and it was actually a Dodge Dakota. And I've had 2 Dodge Dakotas, but I've had, Chevrolets, S10s and full size Chevys. I've had F-150s, and when I got into the F-150, my first F-150 was a 2001, and I've never looked back. It's been all Ford for me ever since then. And the Bullnose trucks appeal to me because I've probably told this story before, but whenever I was 15 years old, my uncle had a 86 that he parked at our house that he had for sale. And he parked at our house for a couple of weeks. And man, I was like 15 years old, and I'm like, Dad, man, I want that truck. Can you help me get that truck, and I'll get a job. I'll pay you back. I was cutting yards, but it wasn't enough to pay for a truck like that. And it was really nice, 302 truck. And he's like, no, you don't need a truck. You don't need a truck, which my dad wasn't into cars, So then he sold the truck, and I always loved that truck. And so then when I got to the point in my life, kids were teenagers at this point, and I was like, I'm going to buy a project car. And my first thought was a truck. Well, I started looking at F-100s, and then I just went straight to Bullnoses. But for one, price. But for two, I had the vision of that truck in my mind. And it's like, that's what I want. I want that truck that I wanted back then. So I got the same body style, but it is nothing like I would have pictured it being, back then. I've got Steelies with dog dish caps, and it's sitting low on the ground, and it's just totally different than what I would have done with that truck back then. Is back then you put white leather tires, and you had a kit set in stock height, and
a little bit of rake in the
little
rear.
Rake,
and it's the Bullnose Fords, just because of that 86 by my grandfather's. That's one of my favorite body styles. And I love a good bump side or a dent side or whatever, but the Bullnose is just it's a tough looking truck.
It is.
I can agree with that.
I think
it's
Ford
one of the
truck,
better body styles.
Yeah, and I think they look good just because of the style of them. They look good lowered or lifted.
Yeah.
Lifted, they look even meaner lifted, but even as a lowered truck, they look really good.
Absolutely. Yeah, and speaking of just a dent side and Fords in general, I had I had this long-term idea to flip cars until I was able to buy something nice, and I just kind of did it in the background. I just traded. I kept trading up and trading up. I bought these 2 Chevy trucks, 69 and 70 maybe. I don't even know. I bought them for cheap. And they weren't that great, but they were pretty much complete. I got one of them to run, a little 6-cylinder, and I traded both those trucks for so it was highly debated in my comment section. They were upset with me because I called it a 74, because it was a 74, but it had a front clip changed on it. So it was a 74. Seeing that. Yeah, everybody was mad at me. I'm like, I promise you, I checked the VIN. It's a 74. Somebody just put like a 79 front clip on it. Yeah. But It was a factory 360, that's an FE, correct?
Yeah,
Mhm.
Yeah,
I believe so.
Yeah, it is.
there's a 360 4-speed, 4-barrel, 4-wheel drive, short bed, and which is just an odd combination to be a big block 4-speed
Yeah,
short bed 4-wheel
yeah,
drive. I mean, that's top of the line back then.
yeah,
And I'm sure it was a good looking truck when it was, new, but this thing was roached. I'm talking not a single brake worked, hardly. I ended up getting it was dumb, but I ordered a new master cylinder and I got wheel cylinders for it, but I can't remember why I didn't. I think because the more I kept messing with it, the more that I found brake lines just destroyed, and
yeah,
they would be like just kinked and crimped and just terrible. But I found one that was good. The one that was going to the rear of the truck, I believe, was still good up to a point. And I did a repair to it or something, and I just took a brake hose and tied it into the left rear wheel cylinder, just straight to it. And that was the only brakes that truck had,
oh,
just the
nice.
left rear, and it worked. But it had 37s on it, if I'm not mistaken. Air shocks on the front and rear. For some reason, they had air shocks on the front too, and it barely ran. I put a power steering pump on it, but the steering box leaked as fast as you put it in there.
Yeah,
And I drove it through the woods. We went off roading with it to my property, and I remember it shot a fireball probably 30 feet in the air, and I thought it was over for me. It backfired so hard because you'd have to spray. The accelerator pump didn't work, so you spray starting fluid at it. I'm sitting in the cab spraying a stream of starting fluid, and I was begging it. I said, "Please start." I cranked it. Something ignited inside the valve covers. You could see it. It's like it ignited in the engine. It flashed once, and then it just backfired all that out of the carburetor 30 feet in the air. And you can see my reaction. I had a GoPro facing me. I'm scared. I
yeah,
look up in the air. I'm like, what just happened?
yeah,
And I drove it out of there somehow. And I got it. I traded it for a 78 long bed, if I'm not mistaken. Somebody had put like a Locker 391 in it. The brakes were redone. It was a running and driving vehicle. It had a little 351 2-barrel. I kept it for a week, and I traded it for a 68 LTD that needed fuel tank brakes, the basic stuff. Got that thing running, put a clear coat on it, new carpet, fixed a couple things, and I turned her. So I started out. I spent $800 on those two trucks, those two Chevy trucks. I sold the LTD for $5,400 or $5,500, and then used that with a little bit extra cash and bought my wife a pro-charged D100 because it was
yeah,
like I think I bought it for like $7,500.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's funny how you like, and I made it on my second channel. I made a whole video explaining that, but it's just
I saw that.
it took like 2 years to make all that happen. But it
Yeah,
was fun, You can if
yeah,
you start with a little bit, you can kind of go up to something interesting,
yeah, yeah. That's pretty awesome. So
Yeah.
you had me at 37s with one brake, one wheel with a brake.
This thing was, like I said, it was so undrivable because I had an electric pump running off of a fuel jug inside the inner fender, and you had to prime this, you had to set this wire here, and it would leak fluid out of the power steering pump, so you had to get out and make sure that it had enough fluid in it. And I mean, it took me probably half of a day to drive maybe 800 feet and turn around and come right back out of the woods. It was
Gosh.
terrible. And I got that thing crossed up, and I ran out of power steering fluid. And to walk through my woods, it's not just a straight shot. You got to go all the way around, back out the trail to go back to I was here, the shot was here, but you got to do a big loop just to go back. So I walked that loop probably 20 times going
Yeah.
back and forth, and then
Yeah.
the tires went flat. I'm like, great. Now what do I do? So I about just left it back there, and it's like, yeah, it's going to be a barn find in about 30 years. But
Yeah.
I mean, that thing,
Oh, man.
it was a wicked looking truck. And the guy I sold that or traded that truck to, he actually came up to me at Ford Fest not long after that, said he was fixing it, like actually going to put it together right. So, I mean, if you would have to replace all the brake lines on it, and there's something that, like, y'all probably know it, but like something with the steering with that Ford trucks do, that like if some bushing is worn out on like I don't remember what it is, but you turn the steering wheel and the cab will do this.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but that truck did it so bad. You could wiggle the steering wheel, the tires will stay still, and the cab's doing this. Like,
I
that's
have
not
not.
normal.
I haven't ran into that.
Yeah,
Now,
I don't know if I have either.
I know there's a bushing in the steering column of like the later model trucks, like the OBSs and stuff, that the steering wheel, when you turn it a certain way, it'll kind of just like it's hung there. You have to pull it back, and
Really?
that's a bushing that wears out in the steering column. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, I haven't heard of what you're talking about. So,
Well, I didn't look any further.
yeah,
I was like,
well,
you know
I don't
what?
blame you.
That's just gonna have to do it. It's just gonna
Yeah.
do that, and it's fine.
And that's character.
Yeah.
That's character.
So we're thinking about your YouTube channel, and you've got a big following, and you are really good at the will it run stuff, and that's one of the things I enjoy watching. So when you look at will it run, and a lot of guys listening to us may not know really where to start. If I was out, I've watched enough of your content and a couple others to kind of know where to start, but take us through how you get started with a car sitting out in your field that you're going to try to get running.
I mean, well, first and foremost, you got to see if it's stuck. If it's locked up, then you're going to have a harder time. So, if you can, if it's a direct fan, you can get in there and pull on it and put a little tension on the belt. And if the crank pulley moves, then you're golden. If it's not going to move, then you got a couple options here. You can pull the spark plugs out, little ATF and some rust penetrant just down in the spark plug holes, let it sit for a little while. I've done that before and had engines come back. I had some that were stuck and I got desperate, and like, for instance, on a 69 Charger that had a tree fall across it, the engine was locked up and I filled it with ATF and let it sit for a while. I've had some I filled with diesel. I took about 10 gallons of diesel and filled it up till it came out the dipstick tube and it came unstuck. But if I'm really desperate, I'll just take and if the starter works, I'll bump the starter. And I was able to get a couple of them broke loose and run after that. Because a lot of times the rings are going to seat and stick and rust to a certain spot. And from that point on, if it moves, 9 times out of 10, it's going to run. Unless something catastrophic has happened and it doesn't work. I mean, you've got 4 things you're looking for. We talked about it in the last video. You're going to need spark, you need fuel, you need compression, and you need, what's the third one? I don't remember. Air. That's it. That's the 4. I couldn't remember. So you need spark, fuel, air, and compression.
Yes.
And so that's what we do. We just go through the basics, check fluids. Does it have oil in it? It has a carburetor look. If it looks like the linkage moves, a lot of times they will be all right. But sometimes you get sticky floats and stuff like that where they'll leak fuel. But, a lot of stuff with points, the older cars with points, that's pretty simple. Most of the time just go ahead and swap out the points and condenser and gap that. It'll get spark. But sometimes you get stuff with like electronic ignition. The Chrysler ignition boxes, if they're original, usually always work. Ford, on the other hand, the Durasparks usually don't work.
Usually don't work. Right?
You just go ahead and buy a new one. GM, if you got an HEI, it never quit running, so you don't have to worry about that. So you've got really simple stuff. Once you kind of figure out the different vehicles and how different quirks about them, you can. A lot of that stuff translates. You learn how to do it on this one, you can figure out how to do it on this one. But, you check if it's stuck, check for oil. If it spins, it's fine. Start rigging up some wiring, check for spark. I'd always do spark first, because if you get spark, you can always just spray a little starting fluid or pour a little gas down it and see if it hits. If it hits, get a good fuel supply and try and see if it'll crank.
Yeah.
And because we did a 66 Barracuda here about a week or so ago, and that happened. We got all that to work, and all of a sudden, it sounded like it was going to run. So I'm like, oh, this is great. So I hook up a fuel pump to it. We start getting ready to see if it'll idle, and all of a sudden, it just seems like it loses spark. Like that's not normal. Something has happened here, and I got to thinking about it. I'm like, it could be a timing chain because they use a nylon gear on some of those engines. On the big sprocket would be nylon, and if they break, and then you're done for. So I pull the distributor cap off of it. I'm like, let's spin it over, see if it's actually spinning, because if the gear's still good, if it's spinning the cam, then it's going to be spinning the distributor.
Yeah.
Pull the cap off, and the distributor's not moving at all. I'm like, uh-oh, that's not good. But then I remembered that on those slant 6 distributors, they're plastic gears too. They've got a nylon gear. So I pulled the distributor out, and sure enough, because I could take the rotor button and just do this. Like, it's got to be that. So I pulled it out, and the gear was completely gone. So you run into stuff like that. I always tell Briar that works with me, I say, if I was sitting for 30 years, I probably wouldn't run either. I'd probably rather just sit here and be dormant. But you just kind of, if you have something that's sitting for a really long time, it's not a bad idea to try and engage the oil pump. I normally don't do that just because, just time. And, as soon as the thing fires off, if it sits for 2 months, you would need to do the same thing because all the oil drains down to the bottom and everything's dry. So it's kind of the same process. But, if you're really worried about it, it's not too hard to pull a distributor and engage the oil pump and prime it real quick.
Yeah.
Because I did that with and one easy way to do that, pull all the spark plugs and just spin it over with a starter.
Yeah.
I had a little that Ford I was telling you about, that 74. That one was bad. Those FEs are, for some reason, they collect water and the valve covers rust on them if they sit for a while, and which very well could have been this truck had been underwater at some point. So when I started looking at it, the valve cover had rusted out and water had gotten down into the rocker shaft, and the rockers are really bad about just getting stuck on an FE. So I took both rocker assemblies off, cleaned them, and oiled them up, made sure they were fine. Got the engine to spin over totally fine. Bought new valve covers for it, and made it run that way. Kept spinning it over with no spark plugs until I saw oil coming out of the cylinder heads. I'm like, well, at that point, the lifters should be pumped up. They should be fine and actually getting some oil pressure. And I was able to put it all back together and make it run. So once you do one, do one, it'll work the same way or work totally different. There's going to be a new challenge for every one of them you do, but just be patient with it. That's the main thing. Don't get in a hurry and do something crazy or do something that'll mess something up, because we've messed some stuff up before. I still break stuff, not even meaning to. And most importantly, if you pull your distributor cap and pull the rotor button, put the rotor button back in. I've won that part many times. I still make that mistake. Still do it.
Yeah, you kind of need that to get your spark.
Yeah.